Sonic is a badnik version of the regular Sonic. What does this mean? Well, the badniks are basically a part of Dr. Eggman's crew, and they are used against Sonic to defeat him in the original Sonic the Hedgehog games. They have appeared in continuity as badniks minions and army ever since the South Island incident. The cool thing about them is that all of them are pretty much unique. They don't have a standard design or size, and instead each take inspiration from different things, such as animals or obviously Eggman's enemies like Sonic. Sometimes they also take inspiration from really abstract kind of things. Some of them look super weird. Badniks are specifically designed for specific types of combat depending on their model. Number 9. Ageless. Because Metal Sonic is a robotic creation, he does not age, which is pretty scary to think about in principle. Although you might think that Sonic doesn't age really either, that's just because the games don't focus on his aging. In fact, hedgehogs really only live for 5 years, so really if you think about it, if Sonic only lived for 5 years, he'd have a very short lifespan, which is really sad and really scary to think about. In reality, Sonic should age and should be capable of aging, so the idea of an endless, evil, robotic Metal Sonic is pretty terrifying, I gotta say. It also means that if we ever showed Sonic as aging, that Metal Sonic would likely get the upper hand, at least physically, potentially being able to defeat and even perhaps finally kill his nemesis Sonic, a terrifying prospect to reflect on. Also makes me want to crack my knuckles, apparently. I'm scared, and when I'm scared I prepare for battle. Number 8. Dr. Eggman's greatest creation. Metal Sonic is widely considered by Dr. Eggman to be his greatest creation, his magnum opus if you will. That is, of course, if you consider Eggman a creator of art when it comes to his robots. I suppose there's a certain kind of artistic nature to what he does, albeit a fairly evil one, because these robots are not made necessarily to be like, I'm gonna paint something. They're made to crush Eggman's opponents. Eggman, of course, is the creator of Metal Sonic, and he created this badnik for a very specific purpose. He was first revealed as Eggman's master creation during the incident on Little Planet. However, in his first battle against Sonic, he would fortunately lose. Haha! This wouldn't stop Eggman from attempting to use him in the future though, in hopes that Metal Sonic would one day achieve his ultimate goal. Number 7. Reason for creation. Metal Sonic was created for a specific purpose, which was to eliminate Sonic. While the two have tussled on multiple occasions, in the end, fortunately, Sonic usually comes out on top, being declared the hero between the two. In fact, I'm pretty sure every time Sonic comes out on top. I can't think of a time that Metal Sonic has won, but I could be wrong. Still, Metal Sonic was designed specifically to match Sonic exactly, making him a deadly foe for our organic blue hedgehog hero. Metal Sonic can perfectly match and replicate Sonic's moves, and even match his speed. Not only that, but he can also even go faster than Sonic can, meaning that he can either meet or beat Sonic when it comes to how fast he moves and travels, which also makes him a tricky opponent to come up against. Number 6. Always comes back. If you thought William Afton was bad for returning again and again, Metal Sonic is just as bad, if not worse. Initially, Sonic and Metal Sonic met on Little Planet and promised to race at Stardust Speedway. The loser of this race would end up destroyed, smashed into a wall, and destroyed by Eggman's laser. Evidently, this is how things shake out for Metal Sonic, who loses, whereas Sonic is of course intended to win this first encounter. Now, it doesn't mean the first time you play that encounter that you'll win, but keep trying until you win, because that's how the story goes. But even though it seemed the robot had been destroyed, and he would not be seen for a while, eventually Metal Sonic would come back again, and again, and again. That's the thing with robots, they can always be rebuilt. And Metal Sonic would not only return to challenge Sonic in the future, but over time he would also evolve into forms more horrifying than his original. Number 5. Secondary antagonist. While Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik is considered to be the main villain of the Sonic franchise, Metal Sonic is not far behind him when it comes to his villain ranking. He is considered to be the secondary antagonist, placing him just under Robotnik in terms of his villainous threat and importance in the games. Metal Sonic is basically the villain you're most loath to face, other than Dr. Eggman, who I personally remember as being a major nuisance to fight against as well. I hate fighting Robotnik, it's never a good time. It always took me so long when I was younger to beat Robotnik, so long! All my coins go everywhere. Metal Sonic being a secondary antagonist makes a lot of sense though, especially considering that Robotnik considers Metal Sonic to be one of, if not his single greatest invention. Number 4. Personality. One of the most terrifying things about Metal Sonic is how cold and ruthless he is. His personality is very different from Sonic's. Instead of being kind, heroic, playful, and curious, he is cruel, cold-hearted, ruthless, and cruel. He kills without any remorse, and is extremely competitive. I would say the only quality, personality-wise, that he and Sonic perhaps share is that they are both competitive, although Sonic is more of like a fun-loving show-off, whereas Metal Sonic is simply determined to beat Sonic at any cost. There have been times even when Metal Sonic has ignored his creator Dr. Eggman's orders in an attempt to best Sonic. That's how determined he is. He's like, I am the ultimate Sonic. That's how he sounds later anyways when he evolves. Oof, Metal Sonic. Number 3, second in command. Aside from being Eggman's master creation and the Sonic series secondary antagonist, Metal Sonic is appointed as Eggman's right-hand badnik, being the second in command when it comes to who helps govern the Eggman Empire. The Eggman Empire is the faction that Eggman leads, with Metal Sonic basically acting as his major general, if you will. The Eggman Empire is not one you'd want to ally yourself with, especially if you yourself are an organic being, that is not an AI or a robot, or if you're not a mad scientist. It values industrialization above all else and is considered to be a totalitarian regime made up mainly of mad scientists and robots. Totalitarian regimes tend to be less about free will and individualism or expression and more about simply serving the will of the state, which is often run by one person, a dictator who tells everyone what to do, forcing them to follow orders or face the consequences. And normally the consequences are real bad. So you don't want to live in that kind of government, it's not a good time. Number 2, Metal Overlord. Metal Sonic doesn't just have one form, he actually has a few forms. At one point, frustrated with constantly losing to Sonic, he decides to remake himself, aiming to turn himself into a monstrous creation which can finally best Sonic the Hedgehog. And there's another evolution before this, but the one that we're focusing on here is when he turns himself into the Metal Overlord, which is a horrifying creation to behold. Metal Overlord barely has a discernible face, so twisted are his features. He barely even resembles Sonic, or Metal Sonic for that matter, a floating creation with metal tubes dangling downward, a spiky tail, if you can even call it that. It's not really a tail, it's like the bottom of his body? I don't know. And spiky floating appendages, in addition to both having a claw and spiky hand. One hand's a claw, one hand spikes. Might be the other way around. Claw, spikes? Something like that. One of those ways. I'm not sure which one's the claw and which one's the spikes, but neither of them are good. Number 1, Ruler of the World. In his Metal Overlord form, Metal Sonic is no longer content to just beat and destroy Sonic. He also aims for a larger goal: world domination. That's right, Metal Overlord plots to defeat Sonic and then conquer the world. I don't know about you, but I definitely would not want this guy to be ruling the world. I mean, that's like having a terribly monstrous creature rule, and I can't imagine, based on his personality and, his politics, the Metal Overlord would make for a very fair, just, or good ruler. Like, I don't know what his political platform necessarily would be, but it can't be good, right? Just even based on the Eggman Empire, which is kind of what he's used to. I'm imagining he'd want to turn us all into spiky robots, modeled after his own image. And I'm just not down for that. I don't know if you guys are down for that. You can let me know if you would be down to live in a world where Metal Overlord rules, but I imagine most of you would not.
Number 10. He wasn't always so blue and speedy. In Fleetway's Sonic the Comic, the guy looked significantly less impressive in the beginning. The brown, spindly hedgehog turned blue and had his speed enhanced by the good doctor O.V. Kintabor. Yes, that's Ivo Robotnik backwards. Here, through a series of experiments and a sweet pair of kicks, Sonic went from a pretty fast brown hedgehog to a crazy fast blue one, and he looks so much better. If you look at blue then brown Sonic, it looks like before and after photos for a meth addict. Number 9. He originally got all his speed from his shoes. While in most forms Sonic is naturally speedy, when he was first introduced his powers came from his power sneakers. In the game's manual it said, "It's Sonic, the real cool hedgehog with the spiked haircut and power sneakers that give him super speed." God, now I'm picturing Sonic with frosted tips because of that haircut thing. It's horrifying. Number 8. The Sega Chant took up an eighth of his first game. Yeah, we all know that early games weren't exactly the most hardware intensive, mostly because the hardware at the time was pretty soft. Damn, that wordplay, call me James Joyce. As it turns out, the short little Sega at the beginning that takes 3 seconds took up an eighth of the space on the entire game, even more than some of the levels. Really puts things in perspective. Number 7. Michael Jackson might have written some Sonic tunes. Yeah, even the king of pop couldn't stay away from the blue guy. During production of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, MJ was asked to write some music for the game, and apparently he did. However, he was later taken off the project, partly due to his not liking how the music sounded on the machine, and partly, the child-related accusations. Many believe, however, that some of his music did end up in the final game. Sony refuses to comment on this though, so we're stuck wondering. Number 6. Sonic loves to breakdance. Comic readers are probably super familiar with Sonic's propensity to get down. But while the whole breakdancing thing started in the comics, it's made its way into a bunch of different games too. For example, one of his taunts in Smash Bros. Brawl is a breakdance, plus pretty much all his fighting in Sonic Battle was breakdancing. The guy feels the rhythm and he just has to move. It's not his fault. Number 5. Record breaker. The Sonic Archie comics have been around for a long time, 24 years. That's almost one whole run. And this incredibly long series makes it the longest running comic series based on a video game. And there have been a lot, so good job Sonic. Number 4. Sonic's skid effect is from Outrun. As is fairly common in games, certain sound effects were pulled from other games to be used in Sonic. Turns out his skidding sound was taken from another Sega game, Outrun. This would be so weird for Outrun players. Personally, I notice every time they play that scream from the StarCraft Academy. It's used all the time and I love it. Number 3. On-screen debut. While most people were first introduced to Sonic in his first game, understandably, he actually made a super random appearance in Radmobile as an air freshener. Yeah, I don't even know what scent he would be. Hedgehog? Evergreen? The smell of speed? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 2. He may not be as fast as people say. We all know that Sonic is super quick, often able to break the sound barrier in the comics. But the nerds over at the Escapist Game Theory actually did the math based on the games and, well, his speed isn't exactly impressive. Turns out when you look at how quickly he can go along the track in the games relative to his size, it works out to roughly 10 meters per second, while the speed of sound is 340 meters per second. Still faster than me, but not exactly the stuff of legend. Number 1. He actually should be able to swim. Fans of the Sonic games may know that the guy is not the best swimmer, and by that I mean if he goes in the water, he dead. I and many others always assumed it was just supposed to be a little quirk of his to make levels more interesting, but it turns out the explanation is way funnier. According to one of his creators, Yuji Naka, he just assumed hedgehogs wouldn't be able to swim just for how they look. Turns out they can, and it's adorable. So Sonic, no more excuses, get in the pool, young man.
In a 10 London Marathon. I'm starting off with something a little more lighthearted that is Sonic themed, but not really about the games. On April 26, 2015, the London Marathon happened. People from around the world head over the pond to challenge themselves, raise money, or do it for fun. Why would you run for fun? Well, in 2015, one Mr. Neil Light decided that it would be fun to run the marathon as our little blue anthropomorphized rodent Sonic, and he did. But the thing is, he also attempted to break the fastest time to cross the line as someone dressed like a video game character. That means he would have had to run the whole 26 miles in that costume in under 3.5 hours. 3 hours of running. I don't even want to run for 3 minutes. Well, he did. He managed to run the course in 3 hours and 9.5 minutes. Very impressive, Neil. Well done. In at 9, comic series. In 1993, Sonic the Hedgehog got his own comic series that has been running ever since. I'm not sure if they've stopped it in all honesty, so if you do know, let me know below. But in 2008, they hadn't, and that's the year I'm talking about. In the Guinness Book of World Records Gamers Edition in 2008, Sonic the Hedgehog had been recognized as the longest running comic series based on a video game. The series had been running for 14 years and had over 180 monthly issues since the start. And in 2009, they had released their 200th issue. The comics had started 2 years after the release of the first game in 1991 on the Sega Genesis, and they had incorporated each new game into the story of the comics. Sonic and the Secret Rings included a free comic made specifically for the game. Both Sonic Chronicles and Sonic Unleashed were included in the continuity as well. So that's something to marvel at. Yes, pun intended. And yes, an actual record on this list. The whole list isn't a joke, people. In at 8, World's Fastest Hedgehog. I'm gonna be honest here, hopefully I don't ruin anyone's perception of Sonic, but hedgehogs can't actually break the sound barrier, guys. At least with the exception of our little blue bundle of needles. Hedgehogs are pretty light on their feet though. While they're not busy sleeping for the better part of a day, they're nocturnal, but also a mood. They can't even win a race against a dog or rabbit. Most hedgehogs can run in short bursts up to around 4 miles per hour, which is 6 kilometers per hour for the other 192 countries that don't use the Imperial system. Literally, there's only 3 left. Just come on. Come to the dark side. We have cookies. and proper measurements. So this definitely puts Sonic as the fastest hedgehog in the world. Let's just ignore Shadow and pretend he doesn't exist since he's not in the movie, therefore not in our world. Breaking barriers there, Sonic. Sound barriers. And it's 7 most 16-bit rappers in one music video. One of the things I never thought of, because why would I think about who has the most 16-bit rappers in a music video if I had never started working here? I wouldn't. Oh boy, this job brings me such exploration. Recently, before the release of the film, Paramount Pictures and Atlantic Records dropped the first music video for the soundtrack to the movie, called Speed Me Up, which sounds like something druggies would say at parties, not gonna lie. And with the cast of, as the article calls them, artists that appear, it looks like the video is one of those parties. Like, who the f is this blue-haired guy? Like, what? He looks like Cookie Monster went emo and they got rejected out of the Wiggles and then One Direction. The video features Wiz Khalifa, Lil Yachty, Ty Dolla $ign, who, and Suko the Child. Is this that blue Kool-Aid haired looking mother? I still don't know. But I haven't seen any other music video with any 16-bit rappers, so I'm thinking that 4 is a record, and they're officially in the Cheese King book of pointless records. You're welcome, movie. Wanna send me some like free tickets or something for doing that? No? Okay. And it's 6, biggest CGI uproar. You already know what I'm talking about, do I really need to explain it? Well, in case you've been living under a rock, I will. The first trailer for the Sonic movie, released April 30th in 2019, was one of the biggest train wrecks in video game movie history, and I'm saying that after the Super Mario Bros. Movie. The community hated it with holy passion, so much so that Paramount ended up pushing the movie to this year, and the hashtag #GottaFixFast was trending on Twitter and on this channel. Having to go back and fix your title character has got to be one of the worst things you have to do when you were so proud of your work, like me in math class. That's assuming it wasn't all a marketing stunt. I saw people saying it's been confirmed that it wasn't a stunt, but confirmed by who? The people who wouldn't want to admit that it was a stunt? Interesting. I don't really think that there has been that big of an uproar for CGI in a movie, at least in recent years. So much hate that it had to change entirely. Legendary. Halfway through at number 5, longest animal member. Okay, so this is technically another joke number, but holy crap, Sonic is giving Luigi a run for his money. Last year, Conan O'Brien figured that he'd also capitalize on the Sonic Rip Fest. However, they took it to a bit of an extreme. However, this version is still far better than the original CG version. When Conan decided to bring the new Sonic out onto stage, it seemed to be that they added a tail, and this person was wearing the suit on backwards. Oh no, that was just the Johnson hanging down to his knees. So do your nads hang low? Do they wobble to and fro? If they're Sonic's, then maybe. However, it looks like Sonic is someone's pet. At least that's why he isn't aggressive. He really got shafted on that one, huh? Okay, I'll stop. The entire 3-minute segment really annoys me, especially when he was doing jumping jacks. Oh lord, why? At least they removed his human teeth. That's all we can ask for. And at 4, 100-meter sprint world record. We know Sonic is fast, but in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, they had to knock him down a peg to make it fair for other contestants. Lame, but whatever. Obviously, they didn't do enough. Sonic in the 100-meter sprint was able to complete the race with a whole new world record. But that's not only a world record for the online players, but in fact, real life. Usain Bolt has a record of 9.58 seconds, which he achieved in 2009. The Sonic from the clip managed to beat the race in 9.56 seconds, 2/100ths of a second faster than Usain. While that may not be much, by Olympic standards it still counts. So there you go, Sonic also has a real world Olympic 100-meter sprint world record. Not so bad for a fake hedgehog, right? I consider this a real record, not a joke one, so come at me. And at 3, first video game character balloon. In 1993, we all witnessed a great tragedy that still shakes us to our cores to this day, if you were alive and sentient enough to care about it at this point. Sonic's first appearance in a Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade was in the 67th parade in 1993. By doing this, he earned the title of first video game character to have a balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. However, during the parade, the Sonic balloon was caught by high winds and ended up getting pushed onto a lamppost, causing it to burst. In the process, it injured a child and an off-duty police officer. For some reason, despite the total blunder and even the injuries, Sonic was at the next parade in 1994 and each one thereafter until 1997. He later came back like Blue Jesus in 2011 with a new version, and it was used until 2013. In 2014, there was a reference during a video game medley, but this was only heard live since they didn't play the performance during broadcasts. And at 2, most animals saved. The animals in Sonic are just various fluffy creatures that are supposed to inhabit the world of Sonic. However, they were imprisoned by Eggman for use in what is in essence a form of living battery that that he uses for his robots. How they are unharmed during this process baffles me, but I guess it saves PETA from coming after them like they do Pokemon. This is actually what provided Sonic with motivation during his first game, then it becomes a recurring theme. Save the animals and beat Eggman. You save the animals by destroying badniks, which are little Eggman robots. And with his track record, Sonic is even doing better than PETA. No, seriously, PETA is horrible. Did you know that out of all shelters in America, PETA's is around the top of the list when it comes to most euthanizations? And they have a rule where you must immediately, dispatch of pit bulls when they come in the door. Yeah, it's horrible. They also made a porn website where they just filled it with animal cruelty videos. That's rude. Finally, in at number 1, most used video game character on this channel. I'm saying this because it's true, it's funny, and it's also a warning. When the Sonic trailer came out, I was working here. I wasn't a host, but I was an intern. I actually suggested the top 10 dumbest Smash Bros stages, but I meant it to be custom stages. Thanks, Johnny. Oh well. Going back on track, when it came out 9 months ago, this channel had, wait for it, 31 videos over the next month and a half, while everyone was still talking about it. Did you hear that? A whole month of videos, just because of one trailer. A few of them come later, but they were sparse, and on my tracker right now I have a few more Sonic videos to script. Even recently we've had 3 videos come out in as many weeks, 4 if you include this one. So yeah, be warned that we've used him too much and we will continue to use him too much again. This is also me poking fun at the managers because we've beat Sonic to death, brought him back, and then done it again. Even more than Mario or even Pikachu and Eevee. And I mean, Pikachu had his own movie too, guys. He only got a few videos on that. Whatever.
And at number 10, not a reboot. One of the biggest mistakes made by a lot of Sonic fans upon seeing the new character designs was to assume that Sonic Boom was a complete reboot of the whole series. In fact, it's just a different branch of the Sonic universe, an interpretation by developer Big Red Button of Sonic and his pals. The television series, which took its cues from the game, was produced by Sega of America and Technicolor Animation Productions, and was the 5th animated series starring the Blue Blur as the title character. And at number 9, fan feedback. A lot of longtime Sonic fans and even casual players weren't overly keen on the changes made to Sonic and his friends. This led to a lot of fan art online mocking the inclusion of bandages and other cringe-worthy accessories that Sonic and his pals were now wearing. This included taking these new aesthetics and putting them on Nintendo characters as a joke. The strongest negative reception though was for Knuckles the Echidna. The character looked as if he was pumped up with steroids, now significantly taller than his usual self, boasting large muscles and a lot of bandages. Or is it sport tape? I don't really know. The character would prove to be even crappier when the game came out, being a dumbed down version of his once great self, loaded with slow and stupid dialogue. Up next, number 8, Rise of Lyric. The first Sonic Boom game to be released was Rise of Lyric. Initially, when pre-release demos of the game were featured at the 2014 E3, there were some mixed reviews. Yet a few publications like Destructoid still nominated it for Best Platform and Best of E3 awards on their individual sites. Others like Game Central panned it, stating that the worst game in the lineup of E3 was Sega's Sonic Boom, which, I quote, was so unspeakably awful we couldn't even force ourselves to play through the whole demo. The latter review was the most telling for what the kind of reception the final release of the game would receive, with critics ripping on it for its horrible level design, dull combat, terrible camera, broken graphics, and serious bugs, with some even calling it the worst game of 2014. Up next at 7, the lowest selling games. With reviews like that, it should be no surprise that Sonic Boom, at the time of its release, was the lowest selling Sonic game of all time. Released in the depths of Sega's financial report that year, it was noted that Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric had sold only 490,000 copies worldwide, on both the Wii U and 3DS combined. Compared to the 15 million copies that the original Sonic the Hedgehog game had acquired over the years, it's a little depressing. To make matters worse, combined with Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal, the franchise had only sold around 620,000, all by May 2015. And at number 6, Uncharted Inspired. Despite hardcore failing, the team behind Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric was pretty solid. It included the likes of Uncharted and Jak and Daxter veteran Bob Raffi. For those of you who are Uncharted fans, you might be putting 2 and 2 together concerning Nathan Drake's threads and Sonic's Sonic Boom aesthetic. Raffi stated in an interview that, I quote, "We were exploring different outfits and we went through a lot of iterations, and the scarf was something I've used in the past, and it works for me and it works for the character." Whew, and it gets better too, friends. He went on to say, I quote, "Really, the history of that comes from the old Western days, with John Wayne, and as a kid watching a lot of those Westerns, that really stuck with me. And you see the use of the Afghan in a lot of action movies because of the soldiers, so that DNA made its way into what makes a character action hero nowadays." Whew, cringe. Up next at 5, Styx the Badger. Let's talk a little bit about one positive aspect of Sonic Boom, the animated series. The main cast of characters were Sonic, Tails, Amy, Knuckles, and Styx the Badger, a new character who made her debut in the Archie comics in Sonic Boom issue number 1. Bill Freiberger, who was the show's executive producer, head writer, and co-showrunner, has said that Styx represents against his own belief system, in the sense that the character will say something absurd, only for that absurd thing to be proven correct by the end of an episode. He has also stated that the character brings a healthy dose of cynicism to the series, to counter the heroism of the other characters, making her more of an anti-hero. Up next at 4, the voice actors. The cast behind the voices of the Sonic Boom animated show are pretty stellar. Roger Craig Smith plays Sonic. He's played Ezio in Assassin's Creed, Captain America in Avengers Assemble, Chris Redfield in Resident Evil, Batman in Arkham Origins, and Kyle Crane in Dying Light, just to name a few. Then we've got Mike Pollock, who plays Robotnik, who has played the mad scientist character in over 18 games, beginning with 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog. There's Travis Willingham, who is the voice of Knuckles, along with 7 other characters in the show and miscellaneous voices. And Cindy Robinson plays Amy Rose, who also plays the voice of Betty Boop in various commercials. Coming in at number 3, Extreme Concepts. If you thought the final concepts for the Sonic Boom characters were ridiculous, well, turns out they could have been a lot worse. Or maybe actually better. While it's uncertain how many versions of previous concept art for the series exist, Sega did release some of Big Red Button's musings for the new designs for the characters back in November of 2014. Bob Raffy has stated, I quote, that there were some more extreme concepts, seeing how far we wanted to go with some variations, and Sonic Team reined us in, and ultimately the designs that you see today are part of that collaborative process of going back and forth. While these designs definitely don't fit into the original Sonic DNA that Raffy and his team aimed to align with, they would have provided a much more interesting take to many fans than the designs we ended up with, and they probably would have been mocked a lot less. Can't please everybody though. And at number 2, westernized. We mentioned earlier that developers Big Red Button were spearheading Sonic Boom. So why did Sega choose to give Sonic over to a Western company, rather than create the new branch with Sonic Team? The reasoning behind the switch up was because Sega wanted Sonic to be more appealing to Western audiences. Takashi Iizuka, who is overseeing everything at Big Red Button, said in an interview that, I quote, as part of completely thinking about the West, we wanted to make sure we had Western game developers and make it a part of Western television. We wanted to make sure it was developed best for Western audiences primarily. This was very important. And last but not least, in at number 1, what went wrong? Former Sega of America producer Stephen Frost gave an interview back in 2015 about why he believes the Sonic Boom games were a bomb, speaking about it a month after he had left the company. Frost stated that the franchise's goal was to reinvent itself, since the core Sonic fanbase was shrinking. Frost had stated that, I quote, the biggest mistake in Boom was adding too many features to it. It was too much to ask of any development team. I was tasked with creating an experience that appeals to an audience which doesn't play Sonic. If I could do it again, I would remove the features and speed would be the main focus from the start.
Number 10. He was created to destroy Sonic. This is definitely known by Sonic fans, but it's pretty important for those who don't play the games. Dr. Eggman created Metal Sonic with the sole purpose of defeating Sonic. He had pretty much all the same powers as Sonic, able to match his speed and reflexes, with the added bonus of being made of metal. More on the specific powers later. So this wasn't some weapon that happens to be used to kill Sonic, that's just all he does. It's a pretty terrible purpose, but it's certainly better than passing butter. Number 9. He can accelerate 4 times faster than Sonic. While Sonic is often lauded as the fastest thing alive, Metal Sonic isn't alive, and he can go way faster than Sonic. And normally he can run roughly Sonic's speed, but if he uses maximum overdrive, he can overclock his main engine to accelerate 4, count 'em, 4 times faster than his fleshy counterpart. Now he can't do it for long, and it's hard to control, but that's pretty darn impressive. It should be noted that it's unclear if this means he runs that much faster or just accelerates that much faster, but either way it's pretty impressive. Number 8. Black Shield. Another power of Metal Sonic that not everyone knows about is his Black Shield. Using this ability causes him to gain a diamond force field around him, which makes him immune to damage while hurting those who try to attack him. Walking into work today, I was wishing I had a Black Shield just to block the damn wind. Winter's dumb. Number 7. Metal Sonic Troopers. Here's one from the Archie comics. When it was believed that Sonic was dead, Uncle Chuck and Rotor made a big ol' army of good Metal Sonics. They were used to defend Acorn Kingdom during Sonic's absence, but they stopped when Sonic came back. But they weren't done, because when Adam came into power, he reprogrammed them to kill all Kintabars. Eggman really needs to watch Black Mirror to understand all the implications of creating this artificial intelligence. Number 6. Voiced by the Boss Man. Fans of Sonic will know that Metal Sonic isn't exactly the talkative type. He's generally either silent or just making computer beeps. But he does have one line in Sonic the Hedgehog the movie. Apparently they didn't want to hire someone specifically for the one line, so the ADR director, Gary Dayan or whatever, decided to voice him. He did totally fine, but I definitely prefer the work of Ryan Drummond, who did the voice for Sonic Heroes. Number 5. Transformations. Sonic Heroes was a pretty wicked time for Metal Sonic, where he just went through a bunch of different transformations. For much of the game, he went as Neo Metal Sonic, but later on he powered up, turning into the even more badass Metal Madness. Here he gained a bunch of mechanical legs and a flamethrower hand, pretty sick, but then he changes again into Metal Overlord and he gets wings. And that might sound kind of anticlimactic, but they make him pretty damn tough to take out. Very cool. I kinda hope we see more transformations moving forward. But moving backwards, there's another neat transformation. Number 4. Red Metal Sonic. Metal Sonic actually had his first transformation in Knuckles Chaotix. You come up against him in World Entrance Level 1 after he takes over the stage select device. But when you get to the final boss, you're in for a metallic surprise, because he's back, he's big, he's dangerous, and he's red. Now granted, since the color red is objectively worse than blue, which is the best color, he loses some points in that respect, but he makes up for it in being huge and awesome. Number 3. He remembers his past incarnations. This is one point that's just part of the comics, but it's a pretty cool tidbit. Eggman eventually gave his newest Metal Sonic all the memories of the destroyed versions, which allow it to use past battles to improve its combat against any enemy. This would be pretty useful, but damn would it be messed up to remember dying all those times, even as a robot. Metal Sonic is basically the Doctor, but evil. And metal, based on a hedgehog. Okay, he isn't that much like the Doctor, I've just been watching a lot of Doctor Who lately. Sue me. Number 2. He turns good. This is definitely my favorite iteration of Metal Sonic. After trapping Tails at a volcano to lure Sonic, then defeating Sonic, the original Metal Sonic had a change of heart when he saw what good friends Tails and Sonic were. Wow, that was way too much Sonic. So he jumps into the fray and sacrifices himself to save the guys. Later on, his parts were found and he was rebuilt by Sir Charles Hedgehog. But this time he was a good guy named Shard. And even though I tend to prefer evil versions of characters, I think Shard is so cool. He looks great, he's powerful, and he's just swell. I love Shard. Number 1. He hates lollygagging. Sometimes with these shocking facts lists, it can be hard to come up with facts that Sonic fans don't know already, because you guys know your stuff. But this one might come as a bit of a surprise. Way back in Knuckles Chaotix, if you let your character stand still for a minute, Metal Sonic decides he's had enough of your laziness and kills you. And once you see him, you're done. He'll follow you until you stop moving, then zap you with his laser. So keep moving. Or, pause the game, that works too.
And at number 10, Stealth the Hedgehog. Stealth appeared in a singular issue of Sonic the Hedgehog comics published by Archie Comics, specifically issue 149. Crafted as a parody of Marvel's Spider-Man, Stealth is a mask-wearing superhero alternative Sonic from Mobius 17. While Stealth's abilities aren't really delved into all that much in the comic, we can presume he has all of the same abilities as the regular Sonic, except likely uses a fighting style that more so suits Peter Parker's. Neat. And at number 9, Metal Sonic. While this version of Sonic might not be from an alternate Earth, Metal Sonic is arguably the most canon alternate version of Sonic, being a replica crafted specifically after Sonic in order to defeat him. Or kill him, technically speaking. Metal Sonic is capable of paralleling Sonic's speed, but just falls short of catching him, since he's missing that pure Sonic gusto of the blue blurs. He's also a robot created by Dr. Robotnik, meaning whenever he's severely damaged, he technically can be repaired, and his consciousness can also live on. Not too shabby. And at 8, Sonic the Zone Cop. Sonic actually has a really neat purpose. He's a zone cop, which means he monitors all realities and maintains balance in all of the zones in the alternate Mobius realities. So Sonic comes from a place called the No Zone, a place in Archie Comics that is 90 degrees from everywhere. It is a perpendicular zone intersecting with all parallel zones, which often makes him appear sideways in the comics. Cute. So what does his job entail? Well, he's the hedgehog who allows people to appear in other zones when they're needed. Think of him as the Sonic comic equivalent of Heimdall from the MCU on Asgard. Aside from having the weight of a massive responsibility on his shoulders like all other zone cops, he has a few nifty tools at his disposal. For starters, he has laser beams built into his uniform that fire from his wrist. He's also got something called a control collar, which is a metal ring that clips around his victim's neck and keeps any powers that they have inactive. Moving on to number 7, Sonark. Sonark is an alternate version of Sonic from the Sentai Zone, a reality that is molded after the Super Sentai and the Gatchamen, aka the Power Rangers and superpowered ninjas. Sonark, along with having all of Sonic's regular abilities, is an armored ninja in this reality, and is part of the Chaos Ninja team. He and his team are actually summoned by Sonic in order to help Sonic with an alternate evil version of Sally Acorn named Salector. Needless to say, Sonark and the rest of the Chaos Ninja team's combined powers are not a threat to be taken lightly. Moving on to number 6, Scourge the Hedgehog, aka Anti-Sonic. Scourge is also known as Anti-Sonic, or actually more commonly, Evil Sonic. He first appeared in the spin-off comics published by Archie Comics and is an alternate version who, in his Mobius, he's the ruler. Scourge has quite the history with Sonic. He's actually used chaos energy from the Chaos Emeralds at one point to become stronger than Sonic, a plan that actually failed when he was punched during the process of absorbing said energy. But despite it not fully working, the chaos energy did change him forever, physically that is, turning the color of his fur and quills permanently green. Perhaps one of the things that makes Scourge a little more deadlier than Sonic though is something that he himself noted in the comics. He suggests to Sonic that the difference between him and the blue blur is one bad day, which is a reference to a line from the Joker in the famous The Killing Joke DC comic book, which was sent to Batman. So Scourge is technically insane, and basically the Joker to Sonic's Batman is what we're getting from that. And at 5, Sonic the Hedgehog from the 2019 film. Despite looking like a twisted freak of nature, this Sonic has a unique ability that extends beyond what we've seen in the video games or the comics. He uses the rings he collects as a means of opening up a portal for teleportation, kinda like Doctor Strange's sling ring in the MCU, in which a portal is open and characters can pass through it to another location. Speaking of Marvel similarities, this Sonic also was depicted in this trailer as moving so fast that time itself stopped. That's a new level of speed for him. And the trailer featured a sequence that was basically the same conceptually as the Quicksilver time slows down sequences featured in the Fox Marvel X-Men franchises. Just saying. And at 4, Cyborg Sonic. Cyborg Sonic is actually a character that doesn't hail from the Archie comics or the video games like most of the others on our list. Instead, he's from the Sonic Boom animated television series. Cyborg Sonic is a cyborg clone of the Blue Blur, and he leads Team Cybonic. So yeah, all these alternates have their own unique teams, a trend that you'll continue to notice more as we move on with our list. Anywho, how did this cyborg clone come to be? Bolt's an alien robot hero from Roboken, which is a city that exists in the clouds above the Earth, made him by using tech from Roboken combined with Sonic's DNA. Cyborg Sonic also wasn't created as an antagonist either. His purpose was to help Team Sonic defend Roboken from Hypnobot, a creation from Tails, which was made for a robot fighting tournament. It strayed, became sentient of sorts, and decided it wanted to eradicate all living things out of revenge for believing that Tails had betrayed it. Back to our cyborg alternate though. Cyborg Sonic is almost identical to Sonic, and is made from a form of metal that behaves like flesh and fur, which allows his body and quills to have recesses and bolts along the lines of his framework, which is pretty neat. He's regarded as Sonic's equal, and when using his spin attack he can completely obliterate obstacles or foes when in motion. He can also fly using thrusters built into his feet and fire lasers from his fingertips, and unlike regular robots, since his brain is made out of organic materials, he's resistant to malware signals. Moving on to number 3, Soniczilla. Soniczilla is, you guessed it, a parody of Godzilla. From an alternate version of Mobius, this Sonic was transformed thanks to radiation from the Chaos Emeralds, becoming a gigantic monster, with the Chaos Emeralds embedded in his chest to boot, which meant he was capable of accessing the powerful gem's abilities. So when he's Soniczilla, he accidentally kills his own father and then transforms back to his regular self in grief. Regardless though, he was able to take on a giant robot. Despite all of his strength, might, and power, Soniczilla doesn't have much control in his monster form as he does in his regular one. Moving on to number 2, Sonic EXE. Sonic EXE is an evil version of Sonic, who was spawned from the Sonic EXE creepypasta and fan-made game of the same name. The game is a corrupted version of the original 1991 Sonic Sega Genesis title, and in it, you play as Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik, who one by one Sonic stalks and murders. His speed is incredibly fast. He can teleport. He's proven to destroy Mobius and cause absolute terrors. Clearly, he's tapping into some demonic supernatural powers in order to torment his once friends and rivals. Makes him pretty strong. And finally, in at number 1, Sonic, spelled S-O-N-I-K. Imagine we just ended the list with like regular Sonic. The Archie comics sure love doing Sonic parodies of Marvel characters and plot lines. Sonic is yet another example of that. He's a character based on a Marvel character called Major Victory, aka Vance Astro, a psychokinetic superhero who was part of the Guardians of the Galaxy, the first iteration, and was an excellent astronaut and athlete to boot. Similar to the Guardians, Sonic has a team of his own called the Freedom Fighters of the Galaxy. He's a post-apocalyptic version of the original Sonic, who was sent to space and encountered aliens who gave him a specialized suit. He would then return to his Mobius 1,000 years later and join the Freedom Fighters, defeating the robotic Brass Knuckles and the planet devourer Robolactus, which is obviously a parody of Marvel's Galactus. Needless to say, his cosmic powers are equivalent to that of Vance Astro's, which is why he tops our list.